Okay, let me show you what is the input split. Okay, what is my block size? So let's take an example. So I have a file which is 130 MB, right? So the first block one will be of size 128 MB. Let's say my block size is 128 MB, right? And block 2 will be how much? What is the size of block 2?
Only 2 MB.
It will be 2 or 128?
No, 2 MB.
2 MB, right? Okay, good.
No,
Okay, 2 MB. All right. Now, let's say while breaking a data into the blocks, somehow it happened like this. So I had a file which looked something like this. Okay. Let's say this is the content of my, it's a kind of a text file. Okay, text file is something like this. This is example of MapReduce. We are demonstrating the concept of input split and blocks STFS, something like this. Okay, let's say this is the content of my text file. Now, for example, if this much of the data, or let's even take more, let's say this much of the data is STFS blocks. STFS blocks are split into 128 MB chunks. Okay, this is my content of the file. Okay, this is the content of my file. Okay, now assume, oops, one second. Okay, this is the content of my file. Okay, now assume my block 1 contains data till over here. Okay, this much of the data is, let's say this is 128 MB, and whatever is left over, it will definitely go into block 2. So starting from here till here, I got the data in block 2, because it's a physical split, right? So you can have a physical split based on the size, and size would not wait for the entire line to complete, right? So you can have a half broken record as well. So this record was half broken when you split by 128 MB size. Is it possible or not? Can we have this scenario, or we cannot have this scenario?
yes, Dheeraj, it is possible.
Yes.
Okay, or in other cases, like say in other example, if you have let's say you have this is some weird text, but you might also have some transactions, right? So transactions, if it is a customer ID, you have customer ID 123, customer name, and then some amount, let's say 45 is the transaction amount, and some other customer ID, some other name, and something like this. Okay, the third customer, and then something like this, and some amount. something like this. You have, let's say these are some of the transactions which you are getting, and you might also have like this much of the transaction, right? This much of the transaction is in block 1, and whatever is left over you can have it in block 2. So whenever you have this type of scenario, you cannot really process the data in parallel. Can you tell me what is the problem if I process this type of record? What is the problem if I process them in parallel? What will happen? So if
Data will be missed.
data
Find
will
out
be
the key value.
very good. Say what will happen if I need the word count of this file. Okay, if I need the word count of this file and my data is splitted like this, will I get the correct result?
No.
Right, because this process, so the way it will work is, let's take this example. So how it will work? It will start taking this word. Let's say I'm doing the same word count. Okay, so this will become 1, is will become 1, this will continue, HT will become 1, right? And then map to, how it will work? It will work as fs1 and chunks1, like this. Right, so we have no word with the name of HD, but since it got splitted, we are getting a word which is not the correct result, right? So to avoid all these type of issues because of the physical split, there is a concept of logical split. Okay, so logical split is nothing but your input split which goes to a mapper. So I cannot send a physical block of the data to my map. I cannot send this much of the data to my map process. What I need to do is I have to logically split the data. So if I know, so while splitting, let's say I started from here, I got know that okay, I have completed 128 MB. But also, since this record is not complete, I'm not going to split it while starting a MapReduce job. Okay, so one input split will not be broken till here. It will continue further unless it gets a line break. Okay, so in a text file, always a new line character or end of the line character represents end of the line, or ideally end of the record, right? So unless it gets that character, it will continue reading, and this much of the data will become split 1, and rest whatever is there, it will become split 2. So this is a logical splitting of the data to avoid any confusion or to avoid any sort of a data loss or avoid any erroneous data because of improper splitting of your records.
So due to logical split, our block number of blocks may be more, right? Means maybe increased.
Absolutely, that's fine. It's allowed, no issues. It may be increased, but that's fine. Not at all a problem. But that's logical, right? That will not be physically stored. All this logical thing will happen only when you are doing the processing. Only once you run a MapReduce job, then only this logical split will come into play, right? While storing, it will be just physical blocks of the data.
Dheeraj, I mean, this reading part is done by mapper, right?
Yes.
So mapper will read a block, and then it will find that okay, it is not a logical
No.
split.
Before a mapper getting invoked, there is a process which creates all these splits, right? So if you look into this example, if you look into this diagram, the input data, there is a class input format. So if it is a text format, that class is going to create the splits, and once the splits are created, then only a maps are getting invoked. So your number of the splits will tell how many mapper to invoke. The mapper is not going to do all of that. The final map function is not going to do all of that, but all of this you can say is part of your MapReduce processing. It comes
So who
under a
does?
MapReduce processing. It comes under a MapReduce processing, but not done by the map function. There's a map function within a mapper. See, who does, right? So mapper will do, but not the map function will do. There's a difference between mapper and a map function. Map function is a function within a mapper, and mapper is a process. So while you start a mapper process, it will do all of these things for you.
So mapper only will do, right?
In a sense, you can say the framework will do. The MapReduce framework will do it for you.
What is this in between split and map RR? What is?
There's a record reader. There's another class which is reading the data from this split and giving it to the mapper. RR represents a record reader. So there are two types of the class: input format, which is responsible to create these splits. And once the splits are created, there is a record reader class which tells, okay, how I want to read it. I have to read it line by line. I have to read it 2 lines at a time or 5 lines at a time. So all that will be taken care by the record reader, and this record reader is going to give the data to the map function, and the map function is what has to be in the map function has to be decided by the developer. Okay, so this map function, how it's going to be, we are going to see that shortly. And all of this, there is a default implementation of all of this. So if at all you have to change anything, because this is one of the very important question in the in certifications and in the interviews, they ask, what if I need to read a file differently, right? Sometimes they ask, okay, I don't want to read line by line. I want to read the entire paragraph in one as a one record. That's also possible, right? Somebody will say, okay, this entire paragraph is my input data, and then anything which starts with our next paragraph is my second record. You can have a data like that. It's not a big deal. Okay, so if you have this type of scenarios and you want to customize the things the way you want, then all of these things will come into play. Then you have to change, override all of these things. Okay, so a lot of everything can be customized in Hadoop because it's an open source and you have ability to customize anything. But by default, it's going to read line by line. So each record will go to, like each line is one record.
So Dheeraj, how does it know? Like for example, HDFS was one word, HD was written in one block, and FS was in different blocks. So how does it know that these are two same word? And
Over here, right?
yes.
See,
So
it will start from here. It will come to know that, okay, 128 trace, this is the end of the block. Okay, but there is no new line end of the line character in this. Okay, so in a text file, unless there is an end of the line, you can never go to the new line. There has to be a new line character over here, right? Once you press enter or end of the line, then only it will go to the next line.
No, my question is, how does it know that FS is part of this one, and which block it has the continuous sentence?
That's not right. So if after HD, if it did not find the end of the line, it means this is not end of the line. It will continue reading till it finds the end of the line. See, end of line is a character. Over here.
No, that's fine. I mean, after HD, there is no end of line, so it knows that there is something, some more
data
text or words are there.
Yes.
Right. But how does it know that which block has its continuous text?
Yeah, so each of the block will have a metadata associated, which will tell you what is the next block ID. Okay, the physical block will contain the address of the next block, and then it will go to the next block to read rest of the data.
Oh,
very good question. It's a very good question. Most of the people do not think that what will happen if and how would it know, because it's quite possible that this block is present on node number 10 and the rest block is present on node number 100, right? So unless, how would you know where is the next data present? So each of the block has its associated metadata which tells, okay, this much, this is block ID, and the next block is present. Usually each of the block will have a unique ID, right? And then the unique ID will represented by a location, right? So everything is, it's all handled, right? Just assume, just believe in the framework and it will take care of you, all of those things. So
Dheeraj, I have a question. Can
mhm,
you go back to the notepad?
yeah.
Like in this case, end of the line is just an example.
Mm.
If the end of the line is exceeding from 128 MB, then what happens?
That's fine, let it exceed.
Like,
It's
so
absolutely
it will,
fine.
so it will, what happen means in, as a memory part, it is increasing the memory size 128 MB to more, or what?
No, it is not increasing
Block size
anything.
will
No.
blocks.
Block size is not increasing, but as I told you, it's a logical thing, right? So logical things like you can have a data which is more than 128 MB, which is absolutely fine. Okay, it might spend more than 128 MB. That's absolutely fine, or it could be less than, little bit less. It's few bytes only, right? It will be just less than by a few bytes or kilobytes, not more than that. So
Yeah,
anything plus minus.
in a text format like 4 or 5 character, it is fine. But as a means some other kind of data,
Yeah.
sometimes like we can suppose some image part we are fetching or something like that. Means while fetching the data, it could
Hmm.
be anything.
Yeah.
So in that case, so it's kilobyte, it is fine. But if it is exceeding then more than 1 MB or something like that, then
That's
it will
also
be the
fine.
same.
That's also fine. It doesn't matter. See, let's say you had 128 MB as a block size. Okay. Now your input split, it is 127 or 126 MB. That's fine. No problem. Instead of taking the entire 128 MB, I can create the input split which is 126 MB. No problem. Or even if it is more than that, let's say 120 or 130 MB, it is absolutely fine. It will go to one mapper.
How 130 MB will keep under 128 MB block?
Now you are not keeping in
Yeah,
one
that's
block. No. See, okay, let's take it like this. Okay, so there is 128 MB. Okay, and there is, let's say, another 30 MB present on block number 2. These are the two blocks. Okay, this is block 1. This is block 1, and this is block 2. Okay, so first you got 120, or let's say usually it will take less than that. Okay, but even if it takes more than that, let's say it is taking 130 MB as the inputs, 130 MB. Okay, so this input split will be when it will be calculated when you are running the program. While storing, it is not storing as 130 MB. It is storing as 128 MB in block 1 and 30 MB in block 2. The moment you run a MapReduce program, look over here. Whenever you start a MapReduce job, then it start creating the splits. So splits are not getting stored anywhere. This is a logical data which will be created once you start a program. So once you start a program, this 138 MB chunk of the data will be created, and that logical data will go to mapper. It will be processed, and then it will be that's all. So that is done. Once the job is completed, all this data is intermediate data which will be deleted, right? The physical data is over here, which is, you are not changing the physical data, right? While reading, you just read 130 MB, you process data and then reduce data, and then that's all.
You mean to say like a physical block is as a same means 128 MB, but
Yeah,
while processing it may create some logical storage value.
absolutely. And that is known as
Okay,
the input split.
okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, that is what is the input split. And to answer the question again, going back, how many mappers? So tell me whether it will be number of input split or it will be equal to number of blocks.
Number
Number
of
of
Input splits.
Number of input splits, right? Not the number of the blocks. So sometimes you might be asked this type of questions like, okay, tell me who decides the number of mappers. So it's not the number of blocks. Okay, it's always the number of input splits which decide the number of the mappers.
And we do not like specify what will be the size of the input split, right?
There is something that you can do. You can set like, okay, I don't want to split more than this and all that. But usually, if you just leave it by default, it will be ideally equal to your block size. There is a way to configure. Yes.
Okay.
One more question. Can you go to Notepad?
Yeah.
So for end of the job means once it is divided as a block in a size of 128 MB, and again it is creating input split. It may be it can be more than 128 or less than 128. So till end of the job execution, this logical memory size will be processed, right?
Yes.
Whatever the data is available in that.
Yes. Yes. Till the job is running, there is a existence of input split. Once job is done, that's gone.
Okay.